All right. Well, hello, Mr. Ippolito students. This is Mr. Ippolito, and it looks like we are successfully on going live. We've got the chat, so I'm super excited. Much better than our first go around on the quarter one, the unit exam review that we did last time. So, hello, good evening, welcome. It is now 7 p.m. and so we are starting our YouTube live quarter one final exam review, online review. Going to go ahead and start off by giving some shout outs to those. I don't know everyone who's online, but if you've placed a comment in the chat box, then I know that you're there. So if you wanna say hello, then I'll give you a shout out. So we have Alexa, Shivani, Matthew. Hello, Matthew. Rachel. Looks like we've got Leah, Janessa, Chloe, and Antonella. I see you on there. I also see Emily Swift. Hello, Emily. Allie. So hello to you, Allie. Abby is on there. Brandon, Nathan, Catherine, Beckham, Lainey. And I think that is everybody, at least everybody who's checked in on the chat. And it looks like we have at least 29 people right now watching live. So this is very exciting. At least 29 that are registered there. And hello to you and Sebastian as well. Okay. So here's how this is going to work. It's just the same as the last review that we had. Cassidy, I'll give you a shout out as well. It's real simple. I don't generate any of this, right? So this is all generated by you. This is a blue copy. You have probably a plain white copy, but this is the final exam review study guide. And so you have all of your questions, and so we've learned all of this stuff. So none of this material is new. It's really just a matter now of us going over, just kind of reviewing, especially since some of the stuff we haven't learned for 8 or 9 or almost 10 weeks now. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and go back up because Leah asked the very first question. Oh, and then, like I said, let me back up really quickly just to intro. This is all based on your questions. This is what you want to know about, because I'm not going to talk about stuff that you already know about, right? I'm only going to go over the things that you specifically request. Also, I will say this, only about half of the exam is written right now. And so I still have another half that I still need to write this evening in preparation for my second period class tomorrow. So a lot of the discussion and the questions that you generate are actually going to inspire me to write the remainder of the questions on the test. So this is hopefully going to work to your advantage, those of you participating either live or if you're watching after the fact. And so let's go ahead and get started. Leah was the first one, and she says, I don't understand the Dieu et mon droit and liberty versus authority. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start on the back, and I'm going to circle a couple of these. These are vocab terms. So Dieu et mon droit is on the bottom, and then liberty versus authority also on the bottom. And then this is also actually covering question number 5 as well. So question number 5 on the review says, what French phrase was at the top of the throne of the British king? And that is Dieu et mon droit. Dieu et mon droit is French for God and my right. So it's this whole idea that back in the old way, so there are two ways. One of the things that we're learning about this quarter is there are two ways to approach government, right? There's the old way, and then there's the new way. So in the old way of government, it was in Europe anyway, and actually, for that matter, for most of the world had either emperors or kings or queens, some sort of unitarian, meaning one leader who kind of ruled everybody. Oftentimes they were authoritarian, which means that they ruled and they had most, if not all, of the power. So that is and of course, as you remember learning about in 7th grade history, because you learned about the medieval social pyramid. We talked about that again in class, in our class just a couple of days ago. It was the Europeans believed that the king was at the top of the social pyramid, and then just above the king was God. So medieval Europe believed that the king got his power from God. So government gets their power from a deity, right? From a religious source. And then the king can then decide whether or not he wants to give rights to people, to however he wants to rule. But power in the old way of thinking, power comes from God to the king, or from God to the leader, God to the emperor, however you want to look at it in whatever culture you're examining. That's what that phrase at the top represents. Dieu et mon droit, God and my right, represents that old way of thinking. And I show that to you, and I showed you right over here on the video just a couple days ago from the Schoolhouse Rock when we watched that. The title of it is No More Kings. In other words, we are going to we're going to try governing a different way, different from anything else that was tried previously in Europe. And even, we look at ancient Greece, and there was direct democracy in ancient Greece. But this was the first time that people had overthrown, the first time in human history that people had overthrown an authoritarian government, or overthrown a monarchy, and said, you know what, we're going to rule for ourselves. So Dieu et mon droit is that French phrase that represents the old way of governing, and then the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence represent a new way of governing, a new set of beliefs that says that people are born with certain rights, and those rights cannot be taken away, and it is the government's responsibility to protect those rights. And furthermore, we give government our consent, right? Consent of the governed from the Declaration of Independence. We give government our consent to rule us. So I think we touched upon quite a few things. Number 5, we even talked about from question number 6 a little bit about consent of the governed. And then we, of course, talked about Dieu et mon droit. The last thing I'm going to mention to answer the rest of Leah's question is she talked about liberty versus authority. This is important when we're talking about the Articles of Confederation, and this is kind of where we end this unit and where we're going to pick up next week when we start learning about the Constitutional Convention and the development of the Constitution. It's this idea, this balancing act that we always have to consider. Here at Rio Norte and in every school that I can think of, there's this balancing act. We talked about it between school authority and teacher authority, right? So how much freedom, how much liberty should teachers have to make up their own rules or to enforce the rules however they feel like it? And how much should the school step in and say, this is what the rule is going to be for the whole school? It was like that right after the revolution as well, because now that the colonies were free and the colonies became states, right? After the revolution, they were 13 independent states. And so after that, there's my daughter, Libby, by the way, who just stepped into the frame. She's helping out this evening. She's going to be checking the chat as soon as I'm done talking and answering this question. So it was this idea that we're constantly trying to balance who should have more power, the states or the federal government? What do you believe in more strongly, liberty or authority? Should the federal government, the national government, the government of the United States have more power, or should the people and states have more liberty, more freedom to govern for themselves, more sovereignty? We're going to learn more about that word sovereignty in the coming weeks. So that's really the balance between liberty and authority. And in fact, those two words were used in the cartoon, the Adventure Tales of America cartoon, where we learned about the Articles of Confederation. So that's liberty versus authority. And if you need more explanation, we can talk about that a little bit later on, a little bit later in the chat if you need a little bit more on that. But I think that pretty much covers it. Okay. And then Abby says, yes, could you please explain liberty versus authority in more depth? Was that the next question I was supposed to get to?
There was Catherine. Catherine asked a question about the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, so I see that Catherine, but I'm just going in order, right? And so I see that Abby is next. And Abby, I feel like I explained the liberty versus authority balance, but if I didn't well enough for you, then holler at me and then I'll get back to it. Beckham says, what up, Mr. Ippolito? What up? And yes, Allie, I am still at school, although I did go home and I did have dinner with my family. Okay, getting back to, okay, so trying to scroll through. It looks like Catherine has the next question. Yes. So Catherine Sherman says, what's the Declaration of Independence created and discussed at the same time as the Articles of Confederation were drafted by the Second Continental Congress? Catherine, that is a great question. So they're 5 years apart. The and here's why. And this should make sense after I explain it to you, because we really didn't talk about it much in class. The Declaration of Independence was written, debated, and signed all in the year 1776. The most important year, I think, in the history of United States history, 1776. We were in the midst of fighting and in the midst of the war with Britain. And it occurred to people after the Battle of Saratoga, right? The turning point battle of the war. I'm going to go ahead and circle Battle of Saratoga because I just checked that off my list there. It occurred to them around the late 1700s, early 1800s, around the late 1770s, early 1780s. It occurred to the Congress because there was still a Congress. They still needed to have a governing, a leadership group while the war was happening. And so they thought to themselves, you know what? we're going to need to have a more permanent government once, like, we actually have a shot of winning this. We actually think we're going to win now. So after the Battle of Saratoga, they start thinking, you know what, maybe we need to have a more permanent form of government, something that's going to lead us out of and beyond the American Revolution. And so it was in the year 1781. They were discussing it as early, I think, as 1779, and then into 1780. And then by 1781, they actually had drafted and approved the Articles of Confederation as we know them and as we discuss them. If you would like to learn more about the Articles of Confederation, I'm going to send you to a few different resources because I don't know how much time we're going to have tonight to talk about them. There's a brain pop that I posted on MrIppolito.com. We watched it in a couple of classes because I thought it was that important. It was that helpful that I showed it in a couple of classes today. So there's a brain pop on the Articles of Confederation, which you can watch at any time using your school login. There's also Chapter 3, Section 1, which you remember a week ago I said, you should read Chapter 3, Section 1. And then, of course, you could also go through that Adventure Tales of America, the little 4-page cartoon that I gave you that kind of summarized the Articles of Confederation. So to answer, short answer to your question, Catherine, there was a 5-year difference between the Declaration and the Articles of Confederation. Okay. Awesome, Alexa. You just said number 4. So I'm going to go to number 4. And so what are natural rights? John Locke, the English philosopher, defined natural rights as the rights that we are given from birth. Now, if you are a religious person, as most people were in England and in the colonies in the 1700s, the time that John Locke was writing this, you would believe that God gave you these rights at birth, right? So those God-given rights, according to their belief, were life, liberty, and property. And then John Locke said, those are the 3 things, life, liberty, and property, that government is pledged to protect. That is government's job. Government's number 1 function is to protect our natural rights, the rights that we're born with, life, liberty, and property. And then the second part of that is, what do both of them have to do with the Declaration of Independence? So Thomas Jefferson, you'll remember, twisted John Locke's words just a little bit. Instead of life, liberty, and property, he said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, right? So he's taking that idea of natural rights, rights that we're born with, and actually taking it a step further, because not only are you born with those rights, but because they are unalienable, that means that you cannot, to be alienated means you're separated, right? You're cast out from a group. That's what alienation is. So if these rights are unalienable, that means that they cannot be separated from you. So not only are you born with them, but they can never be taken away, no matter what. And so Thomas Jefferson says that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And interesting that he should say that among these. He doesn't just say, these are the 3 things. He says among these. So in other words, there could be more rights that we're born with as well, but I'm going to talk about the top 3: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's the connection. John Locke first comes up with the idea of natural rights. Thomas Jefferson steals, borrows, expands upon those rights to call them unalienable rights that can't be taken away, and includes them in the Declaration of Independence. So if Thomas Jefferson had included a works cited page on the Declaration of Independence, he should have cited the work of John Locke, his second treatise on government. Okay, so Catherine, I think that answers, Alexa, I think that answers your question. And now the next question comes from Shivani. Shivani says, just to confirm on number 7 of the study guide, the core paragraph of the Declaration is the second paragraph. All right, I'm going to go ahead and circle number 7, Shivani, and that is correct. The core paragraph starts with, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that one right there, right? That's when I say the core paragraph, I mean, in my belief, you can disagree with me, because history is not just the study of one right answer, right? There can be other right answers. But in this particular case, I'm going to argue that the core paragraph of the Declaration is that second paragraph, because there's so much good stuff in there. And that second paragraph of the Declaration speaks to what we stand for as a nation, who we are, and what we believe in. Those are all those little, it's like checking all these boxes of all the different things that we believe in. And right at the very end, or towards the end, maybe 2/3 of the way through the paragraph, that is also the tie-in with the movie National Treasure that we saw, where the main character, Benjamin Franklin Gates, says there's one line here that's at the heart of it all. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same end. I'm sorry, I might be messing this up a little bit. Evinces them to absolute despotism. It is their right, it is their duty to throw off such something and provide new guards for their future security. I know I'm mangling that. I'm not looking at the Declaration right now, but those are the words. Basically, it's that concept of those who have the ability to act have the responsibility to act. So our founders who were taking that step, right, who were taking a very dangerous step, because had they lost the American Revolution, had they lost the war, they would have been tried and hanged as traitors. They would have been traitors to the British crown, and they would have been tried and convicted of treason, and they would have been executed. So they really, at the very end of the Declaration, this is in the last part now, this isn't the core paragraph, but that very last part where Jefferson says, we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. They were really putting it all on the line for us. They were risking everything, not only themselves, not only their fortunes, their reputations, their honor, but also their families as well. So they really put a lot on the line. They risked a lot to create this nation that we enjoy today, the United States of America. So I like that. All right. So Shivani, hopefully I answered your question. And then next up we have Emily, right? Mm-hmm. So Emily says, what's a representative government? Emily, I just talked about the National Treasure Connection. I literally just talked about that right now. So Emily, I'm going to talk about a representative government. So as we learned about in Roots of American Government, that was like from the second week of school, maybe, the Roots of American Government, that handout. And you can find it, by the way, it is number on your history table of contents. It is number 4 on the history table of contents online on MrIppolito.com. The Roots of American Government talked about, like, where did our government come from, right? It was kind of a review of, a little bit of a review of 5th grade history, 6th grade history, 7th grade history, mostly 6th and 7th, because representative government comes from Rome, ancient Rome. So they had before they became an empire, they were a republic, and they voted for a senate. So the whole idea of a representative government or a republic, it's the same thing, by the way. I'm going to circle those two on the back. We've got republic, and representative government on the vocab. They're right next to each other because they're basically the same thing. It's the idea that we vote for representatives who are going to then go and make laws for us. So that's what we do in the United States today. We vote for members of Congress, senators and members of the House of Representatives. They go to Washington, D.C., they debate, they argue, they draft laws, they propose laws, they debate laws, or bills rather, before they become laws, and then they enact legislation, laws that become the law of the United States. So they are the legislative branch. They are our representatives. They represent us in a representative government or a republic. It's the same thing. We got that idea from ancient Rome. So thank you, Rome, for that. Okay, next is Abby. So what vocabulary from the Declaration of Independence do you want us to know? Okay, so Abby, I am going right now. So what I'm doing is I am doing a Google search. And I am doing a Google search for Declaration of Independence. You can also find this in your book. You are responsible, just to be clear, you're responsible for knowing the entire Declaration of Independence. We spent quite a bit of time on the Declaration of Independence. If I were going to, I'm so glad you asked this. So I'm just going to kind of go through quickly. And if I were going to identify vocabulary, and I'm writing this down now because I think this is such a great question. Unalienable. I think that unalienable or unalienable rights, I think that's something that you should know from the Declaration. Consent of the governed, which is already, that's something that was already in your study guide. Let's see here. I'm going, accordingly, all has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer. That part you need to know about. You need to know about the part that, like, people, like humans, by their human nature, are generally disposed to suffer in silence if there's something wrong, rather than actually, because it takes a lot of courage to actually rise up against an authority figure and say something even when you're suffering. So that's, again, we're in this, the second paragraph, the core paragraph of the Declaration. I would say abolish is probably abolish, because that comes up a couple of times. Abolish means to get rid of. Despotism, I think, is a good, if we're breaking down the Declaration of Independence. Tyranny and despotism are basically the same thing. I'm still in the second paragraph. Okay, and then at this point, I'm just kind of scrolling through a little bit more quickly. I'm going through all of the complaints against the king, right? So that's this list. You remember this because we went over this, complaints against the king, and now I'm in the final paragraph. Oh, but that part is good too. Talking about enemies in war and in peace, friends. That's a really good part of the declaration too. But I'm just going to go to the end. And the last part that I really like is we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. If we're talking about vocabulary, I've never been asked this question, and I just really like it. Really, I would like for you, and it's really not even so much to know vocabulary. I want you to understand the meaning of that core paragraph, because I'm going to be asking at least 2, 3, 4, 5 questions, maybe even on that core paragraph. So I really think that it would be important for you to analyze that and make sure you understand what that core paragraph means. Okay, so I've never been asked that, and I like that question. So Abby, good for you. Emily Swift says, yes, the core paragraph is just the part. Yes, unalienable rights, long abuses. Yes, Emily, you're right. And then Shivani says, again, on number 7 of the study guide, what are the key points and are they of the core paragraph? Okay, so Shivani, just to be clear, because I think I kind of mentioned it, but I'm just going to make it very, very clear. The part of the declaration that I want you to know the most and the best is the core paragraph. That has the most meat in it, right? That is the most important part of the declaration. I think that you should understand that the flow of the declaration, I think that's important. I think it starts off with an introductory paragraph. It's called a preamble. And then you get into the main body paragraph, right? The main core. I don't even know what the purpose. I think it's like the declaration of purpose or something, like stating why are we doing this, and then it's complaints against the king, and then at the end it's the peace out, deuces, we're out of here, right? It's the we are getting out of here, we are leaving, we are formally declaring our independence. That's the final paragraph, and then it ends so honorably with our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. So yeah, I think you should understand the key points of the declaration, the key structure, the key parts of the declaration. But the part that I want you to know the most is the core paragraph. Great question. Josh says, how did events like Stamp Act, Quartering Act, Boston Massacre, Boston Tea Party, and Battle of Lexington and Concord push us closer to the revolution? Well, Josh, you're basically asking me to answer the entire question 3. And here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to answer those individually, just because we've spent so much time on them already. So Josh, if you want to go back to your notes, that was when we did the causes of the American Revolution. That is item number 10 in your history table of contents. We did the gallery walk. We spent a good deal of time talking about the causes of the revolution, right? So all of those things. So I'm not going to, at 7:23, we've already used 23 minutes of our study time. So Josh, I'm not going to go through each one of those individually, but I will. What do I want to talk about? I will tell you that the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So what I'm going to say, I want to correct this, and I want to say that the battles of Lexington and Concord were actually like that's really it is. Those are the first shots fired of the revolution. So that's actually like the start of the revolution. Those are the first battles. So I can't technically say this question. I'm gonna clean this up by just crossing out battles of Lexington and Concord. You just need to know that those were the first battles of the revolution. Really, it's events, and notice it's events like the Stamp Act, the Quartering Act, the Boston Massacre. Really, the bottom line is what I'm asking, Josh, is that you know the causes of the American Revolution as we study them in our gallery walk. And if you don't want to study them from our gallery walk, then they're also in the textbook as well. If we have some time later on, and you really, someone's like, hey, please explain the Stamp Act, then I'll go through these in more detail. But really, that was all on causes of the revolution. So that's all I'm going to say about that for now. But if more people start asking for that, then we can go back to that. Yes. I'm just checking this off. What was that?
I think I see Shivani next.
Okay, I do see. And Matt, I'm going to concur with you. Yes, the king in the Schoolhouse Rock video was a little creepy. Yes, I will affirm you on that. Shivani says, also on number 7 of the study guide, how does the movie National Treasure connect to those key points I asked you to explain above? It was, so a couple of things. First of all, what I already talked about, Shivani, with regard to the movie National Treasure, where he points to that one line, when a long train of abuses and usurpations and pursuing invariably the same object evinces them, like that part right there, with those who have the ability to do something have the responsibility. That's part of it. The other part of National Treasure that I love, and this is kind of the message at the end, is when they take the treasure, and this is the whole purpose, like this makes it all worthwhile. Because if the bad guys would have gotten the treasure, they would have melted down the gold, they would have sold off the jewels, right? I mean, it's all fiction, but they would have, who knows, they would have trashed, shredded, destroyed the Declaration of Independence. And this treasure, they would have selfishly used for themselves. Instead, because the good guys, right, they won in the movie, and they said, you know what, this belongs to the world. We need to give this to the people. And so much like, and they talk about this in the movie, much like the powers of government, the power, right, the power, power should lay with the people. Let's give it to the people. So this whole movie is kind of a metaphor for what the founders did. They risked their lives. They put themselves on the line for the people, to give power to the people, to give wealth to the people. This is like we enjoy the fruits of the labor of our founders. And in the movie, they win, they win this treasure, and they could have kept it for themselves. They could have melted down the gold, just like Ian, the bad guy, was going to do with his guys. But instead, they do something good with it, and they distribute it. They give it to the people. So those are the two things that I think connect. They resonate most strongly with me with regard to the movie National Treasure. Catherine says, can we watch Schoolhouse Rock for the shot heard around the world? You can watch it on YouTube. I don't think we're going to watch it in class, but totally watch it on YouTube. Shot heard around the world, Schoolhouse Rock. You search for it on YouTube and it's right there. Shivani says, from number 8 on the study guide, what were the main features of the Articles of Confederation? Okay, so Shivani, these are the things you need to know. If you are looking, and I don't have a copy of I gave them all away, the cartoon thing, but here's what you need to know from Adventure Tales of America. You need to know the powers of Congress, what they could do, right? The power to declare war, the power to create postal service, the power to regulate weights and measures. Remember, we looked at the clocks, the atomic clocks in my classroom. So you need to know what Congress had the power to do, and then you also need to know the problems under the Articles of Confederation. All of those problems are on the 3rd and 4th pages of those Adventure Tales of America, right? So you go over those, and you will have that. If you feel like that is inadequate, again, as I mentioned earlier in this YouTube live broadcast, you can watch, you have your BrainPop account, so you can watch the Articles of Confederation on BrainPop. I think it's an excellent resource. Also, you can read Chapter 3, Section 1, where it also talks about the features of the Articles of Confederation and the problems of the Articles of Confederation. So I think that's a really good source for you. Catherine says, hi, Libby. So hi, Libby. Shivani says, from the vocab section of the study guide, oh, I just lost it. I scrolled.
From the vocab section of the study guide, what facts specifically would you like us to know about the French Revolution?
Oh, okay. So French Revolution from the vocab section. Oh, there we go. French Revolution. I'm circling it because we're going to talk about it. Here's what you need to know. The French Revolution was inspired by the American Revolution. That's all you need to know. The American Revolution also inspired other revolutions around the world. The revolution in Haiti. So that was actually a slave revolt. Toussaint Louverture, which I don't even think we're going to have time to really mention him, but I'm mentioning him now. Toussaint Louverture was a former slave in Haiti. Haiti was owned by France. They overthrew their French colonial overlords, and they gained their freedom in Haiti. Haiti in the Caribbean. And then Mexico, I think, is the next closest country that gained its independence in a revolution as well. That was in 1821, where they gained their independence against Spain. And then lots of other Latin American countries as well gained their independence. Again, all inspired by the American Revolution. And there have been countries throughout history, the last 200 years, there have been countries in Asia and in Africa, in Europe, the democratic reforms against communist countries. You're going to learn all about communism in 10th grade history. A lot of those countries, Poland and Czechoslovakia, which is now Slovakia and the Czech Republic, which were overthrowing the Soviet domination. So all of these countries throughout world history since the American Revolution have been inspired by our freedom and our democracy and our the way that we really believe in power to the people. I will mention one other thing about the French Revolution. The thing that sets that apart from those other revolutions is that in France, they were not colonies overthrowing like a mother country. Instead, it was like the poor and working classes of France that were trying to overthrow the upper middle and upper classes, the bourgeoisie and the upper class in France. So that's what made the French Revolution a little bit different. But really, the biggest thing that I want you to know is that the French Revolution was inspired by the American Revolution. Okay, I think I've lost where we are.
Okay,
So I just
now
need
we're
to.
at Emily.
Okay, I just need to go back because I scrolled down way too far. From number. Okay, so I just answered Shivani's question on French Revolution. Abby also says hi to you, Libby. Emily says, oh, also, what's the difference between a republic and a representative government? Emily, I just explained that a few minutes ago. They're the same thing. Republic and representative government are the exact same thing, where you vote for representatives who then make laws on your behalf. Shivani says, again, from the vocab section of the study guide, what is war of attrition? So war of attrition. We've talked about this a lot over the last couple of days, but I want to make it really clear. The reason why I had you write that word attrition down is because a war of attrition is when all you need to do is just make sure that one side gives up. That's a war of attrition. The example that I gave is I actually gave an example from my own home, because there are some times when my daughter says, can I stay up a little bit longer? Can I stay up a little bit longer? No. Can I stay up, please? Can I stay up, please? Please, please. You do this sometimes. And then finally we're like, okay, fine, 15 more minutes, whatever. Because we capitulate, because we're like, you know what, whatever. And we give up, and we're like, okay, you win the battle. That's the same thing that the American colonists had to do against Great Britain. They did not need to go and sail across the Atlantic Ocean and seize land in England. They did not need to march into the capital city of London. They did not need to kidnap King George III. They didn't need to do any of that. All they needed to do was just fight until Great Britain gave up. And that is a war of attrition. We're going to revisit this when we learn about the American Civil War, because all the South needed to do in the American Civil War was fight a battle of attrition. And they were the Confederacy, the South. And all they needed to do was fight until the North gave up, the Union. And unfortunately for the South, the Union didn't give up. They just kept pounding. The Union did not give up. The Union did not lose its resolve. And eventually the Union marched into the capital city of Richmond, and the Union outlasted the Confederacy, and it ultimately forced the surrender of the Confederate troops and the Confederate leader, Robert E. Lee. Anyway, that is history that you will learn in the end of third, beginning of fourth quarter. That's Civil War history, but it's the same thing. War of attrition is when you fight until the other side gives up. Usually, I will also say this, usually a war of attrition is a smaller force, a less powerful force, versus a more powerful force. And you need to just have the more powerful group give up, decide that it's just not worth it. That's with the parents, right? That was colonies, American colonies in England. That was the Confederacy and the Union in the Civil War. Anyway, that's a war of attrition. And then Shivani says, go over liberty versus authority again. For those of you just joining us, hello, welcome. Here's liberty versus authority one more time. At the end of the American Revolution. So, I'm sorry, before the American Revolution, there was a very strict authority ruling the American colonies. That was King George III. It was Parliament. It was the government of Great Britain. They were strictly controlling, heavily taxing, and strictly controlling the movements and the ability of the colonists and the colonies to have any kind of freedom, right? To make decisions for themselves. So at that point in time, it was authority that was winning out over liberty for the colonists, from the colonist point of view, right? So it's that on the in the Adventure Tales of America, it's that seesaw, right? It's that teeter-totter of where does the power go? So Under the monarchy, under the British monarchy, it leaned in the direction of British monarchy. They had the most power, and so authority won out. Under the Articles of Confederation, the seesaw, the teeter-totter went the other way, and the colonies had almost total freedom, right? Congress, the national government, the brand new government of the United States, barely had any power at all, right? They could do some things. They could wage war. They could create an army and a navy, but only in a time of war. They couldn't have a standing army because they didn't trust standing armies because of the Quartering Act, right? They didn't trust soldiers just kind of hanging out, not during a time of war. They could make post offices. That's not that exciting. But the two biggest things that the United States government couldn't do, it couldn't tax, and it couldn't regulate trade. And so if you can't tax, if you can't get money for yourself, and you can't regulate the economy, you can't regulate trade, the rest of your power is pretty inconsequential. So when the teeter-totter leaned more towards liberty for the colonies, that's when the country was almost ready to break apart. So you have to find that balance. In your own life, you have to find that balance, and the United States had to find that balance as well. Because if you lean too heavily towards authority, if you have an authority figure in your life that's always telling you what to do, always, 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 you never have any freedom for yourself, and you just feel like limited and constricted. But on the other hand, if you have total freedom and nobody is ever guiding you or telling you what to do or putting any limits or restrictions on your behavior, then you just go nuts. So it's all about trying to find that balance between liberty and authority in life, as it was for the newly independent 13 states right after the revolution in the under the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so I think, Shivani, I think I answered that hopefully once and for all. And then for those people who weren't around the first time to hear it, hopefully you got it that time. Alexa, yes.
People are saying that the sound is bad.
The sound is bad. Okay. Well, I'm going to keep talking, and if the sound continues to be bad, here I'm gonna listen to myself right now. I'm gonna keep talking right now. Oh. If the sound continues.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little choppy. Okay. Well, I get that. I'm not quite sure. It is staticky. Yes, Antonella, you're absolutely right. It does sound staticky, and I'm not sure how to fix that or how to prevent myself from sounding like a robot.
Mom said you sound like you're underwater.
Okay, well, I'm going to do my best. Yes, my wife says it sounds like I am underwater. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to go ahead. Actually, here, we can solve this problem. Libby, go grab, I think, can I switch microphones? I don't know if I can at this point. I'm not sure. Yes, please. We're going to try. We're going to see it. We're going to see if it works, and if it works, then that's great. And then if not, well, then, at least we tried. So I'm going to see if this works, and we'll try a different microphone and see. I just don't know if in the middle of YouTube we can do this. A student in Rio TV left it on, and so the battery's dead. So